Now let's broaden the horizon even further. We know that severe climate change impacts are already happening. And ironically enough, the impact is worse for those regions who have contributed the least to the greenhouse gas emissions, such as Africa, where the economic growth across the continent has been reduced due to climate change. This is something that our next speaker is deeply concerned with. Africa is at the risk of being left behind financially. But his job and his team's job is to make sure that that does not happen. Now, for those of you who have read the program thoroughly, you would be surprised to hear me saying his job is, because we were expecting Dr. Vera Zongwe, who is the United Nations Under-Secretary General and the Executive Secretary of the Economic Commission for Africa, to join us here today. Unfortunately, she was stuck in traffic, so she couldn't join us. But we have a very good replacement in Jean-Paul Adam, who is Director of Technology, Climate Change and Natural Resource Management Division at the Economic Commission for Africa. And I know that he is also working relentlessly to achieve both the Global Agenda 2030 and the African Agenda 2063, which is aiming at transforming Africa into the global powerhouse of the future. And he's joining us now to give us a perspective from Africa. What does it look like from there for the energy transition? And we're really, really happy that you're taking the time to join us this morning. Jean-Paul Adam, the scene is yours. Give him a warm welcome.
Thank you very much, and good morning from Addis Ababa. Your Excellency, the Minister, the Rector of the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, the Vice President of Equinor, and Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start by, first of all, presenting the apologies of Dr. Vera Zongwe, the Under-Secretary General and Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. She very much wished she could be with you in person or even to join you online. Unfortunately, that has not been possible, but she has asked me to emphasize how important this event is to the work that the UNECA is doing, and in particular to recognize that the theme of urgent change could not be more apt, and the calls for urgent action from all sides. But we have yet to properly define what that urgent action looks like. And we do need to recognize that that action will be different at the level of each individual country, and in particular for African countries. Even from within African countries, you will have significant differences. In Africa, you have some countries that are more or less industrialized, while you have the majority that are still in the process of industrialization. You have some countries that have populations of over 200 million, while you also have smaller countries, and I myself am from Africa's smallest country. I'm from the Seychelles, with a population of less than 100,000. So let's look at the question of the transition through various urgencies. Firstly, the urgency of a compelling energy transition. And in Africa, this first and foremost is the urgency of access. There are almost 600 million people without reliable access to electricity, while over 800 million do not have access to clean cooking solutions. There are 23 African countries with less than half of the population with access to electricity. Renewables and related sustainable energy solutions are potentially transformative and are already the most affordable option. But because Africa has a severe deficit in terms of its base generation capacity, renewables alone will not solve this energy deficit. The energy is responsible for 2/3 of global emissions, and this is mainly from developed economies and from China. The current crisis in Ukraine has further raised the urgency for an energy transition, including in African countries, whether they are producers or importers. Because the reality is that the yo-yo effect in terms of the prices of global energy prices, whether it be petroleum or gas, have a detrimental effect to African economies. The focus of African countries is on developing a sustainable value chain around renewable energy. For example, an accelerated global switch to renewables calls on developing countries with critical minerals, such as the Democratic Republic of Congo, that is responsible for 70% of the global cobalt supply, to urgently implement policies that ensure investments in transformation of those minerals into important battery precursors and eventually batteries for the global electric future. Last year, the Economic Commission for Africa and the government of the DRC, in collaboration with Afreximbank, the African Development Bank, and Africa Finance Corporation, convened the DRC Africa Business Forum that resulted in the establishment of the Zambia DRC Battery Council to support African industry in battery precursors. This is built on a study which was done jointly with Bloomberg that showed that these elements can be made in Africa and at a 30% cheaper price compared to the States and China. But first and foremost, we need to address the issue of emissions and the growth of emissions globally. While Africa is the least responsible, there is a real risk of African countries being trapped in unsustainable energy solutions. Africa needs investments of around $500 billion by 2030 and $2 trillion by 2050 to close these development gaps. Therefore, only about 1.5% of global energy in clean energy investments flow to the region, and currently this is focused in only 5 countries. Part of the solution is an unlocking investment from the private sector. Last year, the ECA facilitated and supported the Republic of South Africa in issuing its green bond, allowing for the refinancing of part of its renewable energy sector. This involved the issuance of a 3 billion rand local currency green bond, which was taken up by an international equity firm, PIMCO. There are huge opportunities leading up to COP27 and beyond for us to channel some of this private sector investment further into African renewable energy opportunities. But we must recognize that there is, in addition to this urgency of the transition, a challenge of liquidity in African countries. So we need to address this urgency of liquidity, which is slightly different from the rest of the world. Because even if there is a very strong investment case for investment in generation in Africa, there is a huge gap of investment by governments in the enabling infrastructure, which includes transmission lines and distribution lines, and also being able to have all of the relative which will allow the increase in investment in renewables. To facilitate this liquidity, the UN Economic Commission for Africa has also developed a liquidity and sustainability facility, which aims to facilitate the issuance of African bonds. And our initial estimates show that through this facility, which will essentially create a repurchasing or repo market for Africa, African countries could save at least $11 billion over 5 years. In addition to addressing the issue of liquidity, we must also address the climate emergency. With the commitments that have been made in Paris and in Glasgow, we have to ensure that there is an increased investment in those countries that need it the most, and that we facilitate this energy transition. Urgent action is needed to support these countries, in particular through the mobilization of the $100 billion per year in climate finance. The reality is that African countries need close to $3 trillion for their nationally determined contributions. And these are huge sums that cannot be achieved only through the public sector and require the support of the private sector. Finally, we need to ensure that these investments in the green recovery sectors lead to real benefits across the continent. The Economic Commission for Africa has undertaken a series of case studies that have shown very clearly that there is a higher return on investment in terms of gross value addition and in terms of job creation by investing in green sectors as opposed to fossil fuels. We have seen 420% higher returns in gross value addition and up to 250% higher returns in terms of job creation. But achieving this investment on the continent means looking very specifically at what this transition looks like in each individual country. Increasing base generation capacity in many countries means recognizing the need for transition fuels such as natural gas. There are some countries that can generate additional base generation using renewables where they may have geothermal power or in some cases where they have hydropower. But for a large number, this base generation will only be achievable based on current technologies if we use such as gas as part of that transition. Green hydrogen can potentially be transformative, and we are certainly investing significantly in the research to ensure that Africa can be part of this revolution. But in the interim, the fastest way to bring in more renewables online will be to ensure that the base generation can support this huge investment that is needed in renewables such as solar and wind. Thank you once again for inviting the UNECA to contribute to this very important conversation and addressing the urgency of change, the urgency of an energy transition, and a transition which is just, which provides value for all African citizens and provides reliable incomes and a dignified future for all. Thank you very much.